When you start to talk about food, you get a lot of pushback from people. Most people in this country, anyhow, don't get upset if you talk about not eating rats, skunks, monkey brains, snakes. But change the subject a little bit and switch over to pigs, squirrels, seafood, catfish. Now they start to get upset, especially around this part of the country. Whoa, what are you going to eat? Most Sabbath keepers have given all those unclean things up, the vast majority of them. But talk about fat, blood, and fungus. Fungus, yeah, mushrooms, things like that. They get mad. Just as mad as the bottom feeder and scavenger connoisseurs get mad. I've had people get upset with me about that. And there's so many ideas out there about what we should eat. You know, you got people paleo, vegetarian, vegan, organic, gluten-free, and the list can go on and on and on. People all have different ideas, and they have come to different conclusions, and that's okay. In fact, there's a whole lot of people, well, I don't know a whole lot, but there are people listening right now as I'm talking about this that don't agree with me on the fungus and the fat and the blood, and that's okay. They don't answer me. But what I want to talk about is, number one, what's the Bible say? Because that's all that really matters. And number two, what's some of the reasoning behind it? Because the Bible isn't only a law book, it is a scientific book that reveals things to us. And even if you don't understand the technical reasons why, it reveals things to us so that we can learn and we can benefit. You can benefit, and that's not, for the physical stuff, that's not the only reason you do it. Probably the spiritual is much more important than the physical. But even if you don't understand the reasons why or understand the spiritual aspect of it, you can still benefit from the physical things of it. It reveals every aspect of how we should live. Not just food. Food's only one part of it, a small part of the entire thing, but everything. God makes this declaration, and he makes a promise to us. So let's talk a little bit about the promise that he makes. Take a look at that. That is in Exodus chapter 15, verse 25. There he made a statute and an ordinance for them, and there he tested them, and said, if you diligently heed the voice of the Lord your God, so you got to, diligently is not haphazardly, it's like you got to really try. So if you diligently heed the voice of the Lord your God and do, it's not enough to hear it, you have to do it, what is right in his sight. Not ours, not our reasoning, not what we want to do, not our desires, his. Give ear to his commandments and keep all his statutes. That's a really tall order. So we got to diligently heed. We got to do it. It's got to be under his sight, his reasoning, his instructions. We got to give ear to his commandments and keep all of his statutes. Well, here's where we lose some of the Sabbath keepers, because they've been sucked into Satan's lie about so many sections of the Bible aren't applicable today. Then he says, if we do this, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. You know, there's a lot of ignorance even on this. I did a search this morning, and I was looking for all the diseases that God put on the Egyptians. 9 out of 10 sites came up with the 10 plagues. They think those were the diseases that he put on the Egyptians. They don't get it. They don't understand. And I was really kind of disheartened. So I got a list together. There's more than this, but these are the big ones. A to Z. Common, ancient, Egyptian diseases. I just put them in alphabetical order. Abscesses, appendicitis, arthrosclerosis, in other words, cardiovascular heart disease and hardening of the arteries and plugged arteries, and arthritis, bacterial infections, bladder stones, bubonic plague, cancer, dental disease, gout, kidney disease, leprosy, malaria, measles, paralysis, parasites, pneumonia, polio, smallpox, tuberculosis, and typhus. Sounds like modern day USA or anywhere in the world. Why do you think? See, these things are automatic. God didn't say, oh, there's an Egyptian, let me smite him. He put things in order in creation that when things are obeyed, you get benefits. Let's just take one. Sexually transmitted diseases. If everybody obeyed God's laws on what you're supposed to do about the subject, it wouldn't exist. Everybody that's out there that has it today would die and it'd be gone. Now, violate those laws and voila, there it is. It's automatic. Every single one of them. So why do you think we suffer so much in this country and all over the world today? For those that want to know where that list came from, you have to take a picture of that or I can email it to you, but those are the sources that I pulled the list of the diseases, common diseases of ancient Egypt. Some of them surprised me. Polio, tuberculosis. I didn't know they had that then, but yes, they did. Same things we suffer from today. Okay. But you can do your own search. It's easy enough to find. Many people don't believe that God actually meant it when he said things like all of his statutes. Oh, the commandments, we'll keep that, but the statutes? All of them? Romans. Because, and basically they have been lied to, and people have misinterpreted, like the next couple verses, Romans and 1 Timothy, and they're misapplied. But anyhow, Romans 14:14. I know and am convinced by the Lord Jesus that there is nothing unclean of itself, but to him who considers anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. So you can stand there in front of the table and look at a big juicy ham and say, you're a chicken, you're a chicken, you're a chicken, slice it and eat it, right? The Sabbath keepers could have ham sandwiches for potluck. Instead of lamb, those that want to have lamb at Passover, have a ham. Lamb, ham, sounds very similar. If you think it's unclean, well, then it's unclean to you. But if somebody else thinks it's okay, it's okay. That's not what that means. In 1 Timothy 4:4, for every creature of God is good, and nothing is to be refused if it is received with thanksgiving. For it is sanctified by the word of God and prayer. Somebody that really believes that, wants to hang their hat of salvation on that, I challenge you to eat a pufferfish. Just receive it with thanksgiving. It's a living creature, isn't it? Before we look at animals, though, let's take a look at plants. Genesis chapter 1, verse 29. And God said, see, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food, and it was so. Now, just like it's talking about every creature earlier when we were talking about flesh, there are some herbs and other plants that have medicinal properties taken selectively and sparingly. But if you just decide that that's going to be lunch today and you eat a good healthy portion, you're going to be dead. But it's the concept of it's green and there's seeds. So what's it mean? Nuts, fruits, vegetables, grains. They're all plants that are at one time were green and they bear seeds. What about things like a mushroom? Uh-oh. I know there's a lot of people in the church that like mushrooms. We used to eat them too. Very rarely would we get a pizza without mushrooms on it. It's probably the most common one, but we would eat mushrooms and other things and hamburgers and various foods, some pasta dishes, and it doesn't have seeds. It is a fungus. It does not bear seeds. It has spores. It feeds on manure and dead and decaying material. We had a house with a leaky roof a long time ago when we weren't married that long. First house we ever bought, we had mushrooms growing in our carpet. We'd go out there and we'd harvest them. And it was wet and damp, and even then I didn't feel like, when I was eating mushrooms, I didn't feel like eating those suckers. Let's also look at another one of God's laws. One that I reference from time to time, but I don't spend a lot of time on it, and it really needs to be brought up. Genesis chapter 9, verse 4. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. That's a big one. That's a big one that's really is ignored. Say, how's it ignored? Well, you see people, they take this nice juicy steak, it's got all the blood dripping and running off of it, or the hamburger, and they slap it on the grill and grill it up, or they put the bloody meat and make a stew out of it or something. And Mary's told me they've increased the amount of blood over the past few years in the meat. Why? Well, first, it's a waste product. They don't have a real market for it. I know they can use it in some kind of fertilizers and whatnot, but there's a lot more blood than there's a need for. So they got to dispose of it. So it's sort of like putting fluoride in the water. It's a toxin, and it's a way to get rid of it, and people think it's harmless and it's no big deal. And the second thing is they sell the meat by weight. You go and buy any package and it'll say, so much a pound, so many ounces, and here's what you're going to pay for this piece. Let's go on here. Leviticus chapter 3, verse 17. Says, "This shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations." You don't have to think really hard when it says perpetual. Remember, he said all of his commandments and all of his statutes. So what do you think a perpetual statute throughout all your generations, what do you figure that means? That means it never ends and it's forever. This shall be a perpetual statute throughout all your generations in all your dwellings. You shall eat neither fat nor blood. I'll come back to the fat. I want to talk about the blood first. You say, well, I don't eat blood. Leviticus chapter 7, verse 26. Moreover, you shall not eat any blood in any of your dwellings, whether of bird or beast. Blood of any kind, in any of your dwellings. Leviticus chapter 17, verse 10. And whatever man of the house of Israel, now this doesn't mean that women can do it. They're not exempted. It says, whatever man of the house of Israel or of the strangers who dwell among you. So not even the Israelites, just the strangers, the foreigners, who eats any blood. I will set my face against that person who eats blood, and I will cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. You stop here and ask a question. Does this mean, it's mentioning about the bloods for the altar and that. Does that mean that the blood of the sacrificed animals, you can't eat that? But what about the animals that aren't sacrificed? What about old Betsy the cow? Or Billy the goat? Does that mean you can eat that blood? No, it says, in verse 10, I will set my face against that person who eats blood. It's talking about any blood here. Verse 12. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, no one among you shall eat blood, nor shall any stranger who dwells among you eat blood. Whatever man of the children of Israel or of the strangers who dwell among you who hunts and catches any animal or bird that may be eaten, he shall pour out its blood and cover it with dust. Well, this answers this is only for the sacrifices, because it says it's talking about any bird or animal that's clean, that is, you can eat it as food. Any is the key word here. You can't have any of the blood. Verse 14, for it is the life of all flesh. Its blood sustains its life. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, you shall not eat the blood of any flesh, for the life of all flesh is in its blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off. Now granted, there's not a lot of people that go out and they eat bloody, products with blood mixed in and made with them. In Germany, a lot of it is done there, but in the United States, not so much. But there's a lot of people eating bloody meats. They don't wash it. They don't clean it. They don't get rid of the blood. They just put it in the stove, the oven, the grill, and it'll just sit there and coagulate all on top of it, and then they slice it up and eat it. 1 Samuel, let me show you an example. God's not real happy when this happens. 1 Samuel 14:32. And the people rushed on the spoil and took sheep, oxen, and calves, and slaughtered them on the ground. And the people ate them with the blood. When they told Saul, saying, "Look, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood." When we do this, we're sinning against God. It's not only bad for you health-wise, it's a sin. The people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood. So he said, "You have dealt treacherously. Roll a large stone to me this day." And Saul said, "Dispense yourselves among the people and say to them, bring me here every man's ox and every man's sheep. Slaughter them here and eat. And do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood." So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night and slaughtered it there. So obviously these animals weren't bled. They weren't slaughtered biblically, where you would drain the blood from them. In fact, they just started cutting into them and chowing down. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 23. Let's read that. "Only be sure that you do not eat the blood, for the blood is the life. You may not eat the life with the meat. You shall not eat it. You shall pour it on the earth like water. You shall not eat it, that it might be well with you and your children after you when you do what is right in the sight of the Lord." So this is a generational thing. You say, well, how can this be passed down to children? Well, I'll give you one physical way. Two, actually. Most people, they grow up and they see what their parents and grandparents are doing. And they do the same thing. You know, we like to say, well, it's in my genes. I got bad genes. Well, most of the time people are thinking genetically. They've never looked at a subject called epigenetics, where it's true some people in families are more susceptible to this or that. But one thing I've noticed is that you can change even genetic dispositions for it. There's a book called Epigenetics. You can read it, and it's from Joel Wallach. And also, though, it is in the genes. If there's a really skinny, sickly-looking family, a lot of times everybody in that family is really skinny and sickly-looking, and if they're, a 300-pound... There's a lot of fat people in my family, I'll just say it, okay? And a lot of it has got to do with traditions. Not always. Not always. You can't. Traditions, how you eat, what you eat, whether you sit on the couch and watch TV or you're active and you're out doing things, that's in your genes. Some people got to take the genes off before they get on the scale because it helps them by a pound or two. But I was predisposed to that. And I had to actually figure out what was the solution for me, because I'm 115 pounds. When Israel met me, I weighed about 15 pounds more. But what works for me doesn't necessarily work for somebody else. I was able to figure it out for me. But everybody, it's not that, you just eat all junk food. No. It's not that, you don't exercise. Well, I still don't exercise, okay? But people get a bad rap. But you go to Germany, and they have products like blood pudding. Not appealing to me, but they have it. Blood sausage. And everywhere else, and very common in this country, meat that does not have blood drained from it. We're forbidden from consuming this. Disease, bacteria, virus, and toxins are in the blood. It says in the Bible, the life is in the blood. Yeah, all kinds of life. Good, healthy life, and bad, toxic, diseased life. One of the physical reasons God forbids us to eat blood is freedom from the diseases of Egypt. Now you say, well, I don't care. I'm not going to go through this trouble. Okay, fine. If you're doing it in stupidity, or because you really don't know, just ignorance, that's one thing. But if you know what the Bible says and you do it anyhow, now you got a whole nother problem. But just ignore it. The Egyptians didn't know, and they suffered because of it. Now the other half of the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Let's take a look at that. Go back to fat. Leviticus 3:16. And the priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma. All the fat is the Lord's. This shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations. In all your dwellings you shall eat neither fat nor blood. Just like you're not supposed to eat any blood, you're not supposed to eat the fat either. Does this mean that only fat from sacrificial offerings, or in this specific instance, talks about a whole burnt offering, that's forbidden for us to consume, but we can eat the fat off of animals that aren't sacrificed? Valid question. Let's look at Leviticus 7:23. It says, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, you shall not eat any fat." It doesn't say you shall not eat the fat of the sacrifices to the Lord your God. It says you shall not eat any, and this is talking about animal fat, not healthy fats, like from fish, avocados, coconut oils, things like that. You shall not eat any fat of ox or sheep or goat. It's talking about red meat fats specifically. And the fat of an animal that dies naturally, well, that's not sacrifice. It just died on its own. And the fat of what is torn by wild beast may be used in any other way, but you shall by no means eat it. So you could maybe use it for oils, solvents, things like that, but you can't eat it. Those definitely are not something you are going to sacrifice. You're forbidden from eating it, but you can use it for other things. Verse 25. For whoever eats the fat of the animal which men offer as an offering made by fire to the Lord, the person who eats it shall be cut off from his people. Moreover, you shall not eat any blood in any of your dwellings, whether of bird or beast. Whoever eats any blood, that person shall be cut off from his people. Now, in every instance, it's not like this, but very oftentimes the fat and the blood, they're all right there in the same concept of what it's talking about. Like I said, there's people listening to today that don't agree. That's okay. I'll tell you what I think. Make your own decisions. The bottom line is that toxins are stored in the fat, making not eating it or avoiding it as much as possible far more important today than it was 3,000 years ago. That's where all your toxins are. Also, a diet high in saturated fats causes cardiovascular disease. It plugs up your arteries. Oh, by the way, atherosclerosis, one of the diseases on the Egyptians that God put on the Egyptians. Why? They ate fat. They ate blood. They did all the things they ignored. They didn't keep all of his commandments and all of his statutes. And the order of the things, the way he created it, they automatically suffered the consequences. Now, besides the plants, the blood, and the fat, clean and unclean meats. Abel, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Daniel, and Ezekiel all stand out for not eating unclean meats. Genesis chapter 7, verse 1. And the Lord said to Noah, "Come into the ark, you and all your household, because I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. You shall take with you 7 of each of every clean animal, a male and his female, 2 each of animals that are unclean, a male and his female, also 7 each of the birds of the air, male and female, to keep the species alive on the face of all the earth." Now, I was lied to growing up. The Seventh-day Adventists taught that you couldn't eat meat until after the flood. I guess they never read Genesis where Abel brought of his flocks, the animals he sacrificed, and the fat too. You don't need a whole lot just to make a few wool sweaters, okay? But almost every painting or picture you see of Noah and the ark, what do you see on that? 2 of everything. 2. That's not what the Bible says. Even the kids can read that and comprehend. Once they learn how to read it, it's very easy to understand. Satan's really busy even with the pictures and the little lessons for the kids on Noah and the ark, deceiving them, showing no difference between clean and unclean. And God made a difference, and Noah knew it. He knew what was clean. And when they got off the ark and he made a sacrifice, he didn't sacrifice any of the pigs. Why 7 pairs? Because some of them were for food. Some of them were sacrificed and offered to God. And if you got 2 pigs and you eat one, guess what? You're going to have no more pigs. They ain't food. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 1. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the animals which you may eat among the animals that are on the earth, among the animals. Whatever divides the hoof, having cloven hoofs and chewing the cud, that you may eat." So it's dual. There's 2 things that they have to do. They have to have a cloven hoof, the split hoof, and they got to chew the cud. Verse 4, nevertheless, these you shall not eat among those that chew the cud, or those that have cloven hoofs. The camel, because it chews the cud but does not have cloven hoofs, is unclean to you. The rock hare, Hyrax, Hyrax, okay, because it chews the cud but does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. The hare, because it chews the cud and does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. The swine, though it divides the hoof, having cloven hoofs, it does not chew the cud, it is unclean to you. Their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall not touch. They are unclean to you. So why only animals, some of the physical things, why only animals with cloven hooves and chew the cud, both, versus one or the other? Hooves protect the paws from injury. Over the years, several times, Mary's let the dogs out in the backyard. We got some problems in our backyard. The guy we bought the house from, I don't think he ever went to the dump. He burned a lot of the garbage and the bottles, lots of booze bottles, and those he'd throw up on the hill and he'd shoot them and he'd break them. And there is so much glass up there, it just comes up out of the ground. And several times a year, Mary and I will be walking around back there, and we got to pull the broken glass up because it's coming up out of the ground. And when her dogs go out there, they got paws, not hooves. They go out there and they run around and they step on it and they get cut. And it happens more than once a year, a few times a year. When that happens, that becomes a gateway for parasites, bacteria, germs, and disease. So the hooves, in one aspect of it, is protective. But why cloven hoof animals? Like a horse doesn't qualify. One big hoof. So I did a search. I tried to find out why, and there's all kinds of ideas out there, but one that kind of made sense to me not being a veterinarian or an expert on animals, but they have, the clean animals, they have two hooves. Basically two big toes with a split hoof on it that protects it. It helps the goats when they're climbing around and getting out. And some of the animals that are running around that have a cloven hoof, it spreads the toes apart every time they step down and put pressure on it. And when they're moving and going through wet, muddy areas or running, less of the mud gets splashed up on their bellies and underneath them. Now, I know cows can still get, I've seen cows out in the muddy field and that, they still get, but they're much cleaner. There's much less of it. And it's thrown up on the body of the animal when it's moving around in muddy, swampy areas. And that can contain bacteria, germs, viruses, things like that. The Merck Veterinary Manual, now a lot of people don't know what the Merck Manual is. I've got a couple of them, but I don't have the veterinary manual. It says that animals that are ruminants, in other words, animals that chew the cud, predominantly, they're not predators, and they get their nutrition from plants. This means that they have less parasites, disease, and their meat is healthier. And the unclean animals are mainly predators and scavengers. The garbage can of creation. They'll eat anything. So the meat is healthier and better. A few years ago, it's still out there. They just don't tell you. They just kill them before they get old enough to develop it. But there was a scare about mad cow disease. Why Mad cow disease, because they were taking the downer cows, the sick ones, grinding them up in the rendering plants and then taking that protein and feeding it back to the cows. In people, it's called Kuru disease. That's what the cannibals get for eating other people. Today we call it Alzheimer's and different things. Not everybody, Alzheimer's is not necessarily Kuru, but the results and the symptoms are an awful lot alike. But it's okay. It's safe to go out and eat that meat now because they don't feed the downer cows to the cows anymore. They feed that to the pigs. And then the dead and sick pigs, they take that and they feed it to the cows. And it's safe. And anybody who wants to buy a bridge in the Arizona desert, I probably can find one for you for a good price. Let's take a look at fish. Leviticus 11:9. These you may eat of all that are in the water, whatever the water has in the water has fins and scales. Whether in the seas or in the rivers, that you may eat. But in all the seas or in the rivers that do not have fins and scales, all that move in the water, or any living thing which is in the water, they are an abomination to you. They shall be an abomination to you. You shall not eat their flesh, but you shall regard their carcasses as an abomination. Whatever in the water does not have fins or scales, that shall be an abomination to you. What are some of the physical things that does? The scales are like miniature body armor panels. It protects them from worms, funguses, parasites, and bacteria. There's a physical reason for it. The unclean fish, in addition to that don't have those things, because there are some unclean, they'll have scales but not a fin, or fin and not scales. They're basically the bottom feeders, the garbage can of the water. Some people don't like this. I remember there was a guy who used to come decades, he would come to Bible study every Friday night. Name was Steve. And one time he goes home and his mother had made fish for supper. And he was kind of suspicious. And he says, "Mama, what kind of fish is that?" "That's good fish." And he says, "But what kind of good fish is that?" Well, that was catfish. And it was on sale, and she bought it, and she tried feeding it to him, and he knew. He wouldn't eat it. And Mama got really upset with him because that was good fish. And she raised him right, and he grew up eating that catfish, and now he's going to turn his nose up at it because it doesn't have fins and scales. It doesn't pass the muster, and what God says is okay to eat and what isn't. What about the birds? Leviticus 11:13. Says, "And these you shall regard as an abomination among the birds." Not even just unclean or these you shall avoid. Abomination among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, the vulture, the buzzard, the kite, the falcon after its kind, every raven after its kind, the ostrich and the short-eared owl, the seagull and the hawk after its kind, the little owl, the fisher owl, and the screech owl, the white owl, the jackdaw and the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron after its kind, the hoopie, and the bat. Several years maybe 20 years ago, Mary and I went to Dollywood, and they had built a eagle sanctuary thing, and they had eagles in there, and there was a few vultures in there, but and so we went and listened to what they had to say about them, and he was talking about the vultures, and he was talking about, and the guy, I'm sure maybe he didn't eat vulture, but I'm sure he ate pork and shrimp and catfish and all the other creepy crawlers. But he was saying, like, with the if you see them out in the open, out in the wild, and that they see something laying on the side of the road's been hit, and it's all swollen up and rotten, and it's all full of toxins and botulism, which would kill people or most other animals. He says that buzzard will come down and tear off a hunk of that meat and go fly away and chew, and it'll take that botulism and wipe its beak on the way. Literally, it won't do that, but that was good. Let me go back and get me another piece. God created them so their digestive systems, and the pig's digestive system, which is very similar to humans, they're different. Now, someday it says that the lion will eat straw, but that's not today, okay? So God's got a change planned for the future, but not for today. We're not supposed to eat them. So this gives a list of the birds that we're not supposed to eat. I put something on the birds that are clean. The clean birds have 6 things in common. They're not predators. If they catch food in the air, they bring it down to the ground if possible and divide it with their beaks. Unclean birds, on the other hand, will eat it while they're flying around, or if they do bring it down to the ground, they just rip it apart with their bill. Number 3, they have an elongated middle front toe and a hind toe. And they spread their toes so that the hind toe is on one side of the perch and the 3 front toes are on the other side. I didn't know that. 5, they have crows or crops. And 6, they have a gizzard with a double lining. So God designed them differently. The clean are different from the unclean. And, oh, by the way, the unclean birds are birds of prey. The cleanup crew. Years ago, I used to have a little pamphlet that says, "Don't eat the cleanup crew." Leviticus 11:20. All flying insects that creep on all fours shall be an abomination to you. Yet these you may eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours. Those which have joined legs above their feet, to leap on the earth, these you may eat, the locust after its kind, the destroying locust after its kind, the cricket after its kind, and the grasshopper after its kind. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet shall be an abomination to you. I don't know all the technical reasons why on that, but God says these insects you can eat, these insects you can't eat. Do it. You want to violate it? Go for it. Let's come back in 20 years and see how it's gone for you. You know, Matthew 3:4 tells us that John the Baptist ate locusts and wild honey. So obviously, that's okay to eat if you need to. I don't want to eat locusts myself, even if they're chocolate covered. I've seen where they do chocolate covered grasshoppers, and no thank you. I'll pass. Yeah. But if you were starving and you had your choice between a tree rat, a squirrel, and a big pile of grasshoppers, guess which one you could biblically choose? Yeah, just like crispy French fries. So what are the Levites or the religious leaders and the teachers, what were they supposed to do? What was their goal that God told them they were supposed to do? Ezekiel 44:23, and this is a future thing too. It's not just in the past. And they shall teach my people the difference between the holy and the unholy, and cause them to discern between the unclean and the clean. And in controversy they shall stand as judges and judge according to my judgments. They shall keep my laws and my statutes in all my appointed meetings, and they shall hallow my Sabbaths. There's a whole lot of people that aren't interested in these things. And we should be. This is just one small category, one small thing, food, of so many instructions that God gives us. If we eat the forbidden things that God says not to eat, we defile ourselves. 1 Corinthians 3:16 says, "Do you not know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, which temple you are." In other words, go ahead and eat that ham sandwich. You have just defiled yourself, and when you defile the temple, God vacates. It really is a salvational thing. Blood, fat, clean, unclean, forbidden, abominations. If we violate any of God's laws, there's automatic penalties, like I said, for doing this. If we refuse to obey Him and give Him the middle finger because we like a 22% fat burger from McDonald's or Hardee's, forget the talk. They're full of toxins, okay? And now, all the fat that they grind up and put back in are even more toxins. They've been feeding them downer pigs that were fed to downer cows, and now they got and injecting them with vaccines and antibiotics and everything else to keep them from dying before they can slaughter them. And now you're going to chow down on the toxins. Not good, not smart. Give them the middle finger, though, and we can be cut off and lose our salvation. At the very least, one day you're going to end up in a place that they abbreviate. It's an acronym. It's called ICU, and it doesn't mean like I see you. It's at the Temple of Modern Medicine where they hook all kinds of machines up to you and charge you exorbitant amounts. And the people are lying there suffering and dying and saying, "Why me, God?" So what can we do? Let's take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 15. Choose life. We all got a choice to make, each and every one of us. Deuteronomy 30:15 says, "See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. In that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in His ways, and to keep His commandments, His statutes, and His judgments, that you may live and multiply. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. But if your heart turns away so that you do not hear, and you're drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I announce to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not prolong your days in the land which you chose to cross over to Jordan to go in and possess. I call heaven and earth as a witness today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and cursings. Therefore choose life that both you and your descendants may live, that you may love the Lord your God, and that you may obey his voice, and that you may cling to him. For he is your life and the length of your days, and that you may dwell in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them. Choose life. Same thing. Same thing that ancient Israel had to choose. We've got to choose it today. His commandments, his statutes, his judgments. They are there not to put barriers that are impossible to do. They are there because God loves us, and they're there for our protection. From the things we stick in our mouth, to the clothes we wear, to how we treat each other, to how we worship him, to the observances that we participate in or don't participate in them. Every single one. And what did Jesus say in John 14:15? If you love me, keep my commands.